This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there.
From Innistrad to Shadowmoor, what spooky top 10 does Nitsuhone have in store?
Hi everyone, I'm Nitsuhone and today is Monday, and that means it's time for the 515th MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. As you probably guessed from the spooky intro, this is a Halloween-inspired MTG Top 10. And all the remaining MTG Top 10s this month will also be Halloween-inspired. Anyway, in this MTG Top 10, we're going to take a look at skeletons. Skeletons often feature as Halloween decorations, and they're also one of Magic's oldest creature types, originally appearing on Drudge skeletons back in Alpha. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have the skeleton creature type or be capable of producing a skeleton creature token. In all, there were 82 cards eligible for this list, and in this video we'll take a look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours and World Championships, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Grand Prix and Regional Championships. Alright, let's get to the list. At number 10, it is Keldoran Dead. This skeleton boasts an impressive stat line as a 1-mana 3/1, and it can even regenerate. And actually, as we'll see, lots of skeletons can regenerate. Of course, this one comes with a downside. You have to sacrifice a creature when it enters the battlefield, and if the dead is your only creature, that means you sacrifice them. While it was printed way back in Ice Age, it didn't actually see play anywhere until 2005, when it was featured in Legacy Auriok Salvager combo decks, which look to return cheap mana-producing artifacts from the graveyard to the battlefield over and over with the Salvager's ability, and this allows you to make infinite mana. The deck could simultaneously load up the graveyard and tutor up the Salvagers with Gamekeeper. In other words, you got to set up your combo with a single card. One of the main ways the deck could sacrifice it was to cast Living Wish, grab a Keldoran Dead, and sacrifice the Gamekeeper to it. At which point you were usually going to be able to combo off and win the game. Both of the Dead's points came back in 2005, so its spot on this list is definitely in danger. At number 9, it is Dimir House Guard. Actually casting this isn't very impressive, as it's a 4-mana 2/3 with Fear. However, it does come with Transmute, which means you can pay a mana cost and discard it to tutor up any card in your deck with the same mana value as the guards. In the right deck, this is basically a tutor that has the upside of actually doing something in situations where you don't really need to search for something. And that's not true of most tutors. Obviously, it has pretty narrow utility as a tutor, as your deck needs to have some really important cards with the right mana value or it just won't be worth it. It has seen sporadic play over the years, like in modern Birthing Pod and Legacy Natural Order decks. It hasn't gained any points since 2012. At number 8, it is Augur of Skulls, another skeleton who can regenerate. It can also give itself up to make the opponent discard 2 cards, and while you can only use that ability during your upkeep, that does mean the skeleton can produce a 2-for-1, and those are always pretty sweet. It gained its points in standard Tarmorak decks back in 2007, a deck that, as you can probably tell by the name, ran both Tarmogoyf and the Rack. Those 2 cards go quite well with the Augur, as the Goyf wants cards in the graveyard quickly, and the Rack wants your opponent to have as few cards in their hand as possible. Augur of Skulls hasn't found another home since then though, and doesn't have any points since 2007. At number 7, it is Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon. This dragon skeleton is a fairly impressive 5-mana 4/4 with Flying and Infect, and you can also pay mana to give it haste or regenerate it. It gained all of its points in mono black and blue black Infect decks while it was in standard. Obviously, given its size and evasion plus possible haste, it can quickly give your opponent enough poison counters to make them lose the game. And it could do that all on its own. And chances were pretty good that your opponent would already have some poison counters by the time you played Skithiryx, so you might just win the game in a single swing. Like the skeletons who came before it though, Skithiryx hasn't been active in quite some time, not gaining any points since 2011. At number 6, it is Deathless Knight. This 4-mana 4/2 comes with haste, and while it doesn't regenerate like some of the older skeletons, it is pretty difficult to get rid of permanently. When you gain life for the first time during a turn, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand. The Knight's high power and haste means that's a pretty big problem for your opponent, as they usually can't just ignore a 4-power creature coming at them every single turn. The Knight was a pretty nice fit in standard sacrifice decks because they ran lots of food, which of course gains you life, and they also had lots of sacrifice effects that could give you even more value with a creature that doesn't stay dead. It wasn't the kind of card that found its way into every version of that deck though, and it hasn't gained any points since 2020. At number 5, it is Spawning Pool. This is a land that for 1 generic mana and a black can become a 1/1 creature with the skeleton type, and the ability to regenerate for a single black mana. In other words, it's Drudge Skeletons, but a land. I often sing the praises of creature lands, and that's because they just offer so much value. This functions as a reasonable land for as long as you need it to, but it can also become a very real body when the situation calls for it. It can be useful as an attacker or a blocker, thanks to its ability to regenerate. Basically, it's a land that provides serious value all game long, even when you don't need mana, and you can't say that about most lands. It gained all of its points in standard mono-black mid-range decks between 1999 and 2000. It is the kind of card that has a reasonable shot at seeing play in standard if it ever gets reprinted, but they don't really like the regenerate ability anymore these days, so that's pretty unlikely. At number 4, it is Lightning Skelemental. This elemental skeleton is a 6/1 with trample and haste, and when it does combat damage to a player, it makes them discard 2 cards. That's usually going to result in some big damage and a 2-for-1, which is awesome. The Skelemental was printed in Modern Horizons, so that means it was never legal in formats like Standard or Pioneer, but it's already done some pretty significant work in Modern, where it's played in that format's elemental tribal decks, which use Risen Reef to generate all kinds of value. Playing a Skelemental and getting the trigger from Risen Reef at the same time is a pretty great feeling. It's likely to keep gaining points in Modern going forward, and has a pretty good shot at moving significantly higher on this list. At number 3, it is Skeletal Vampire, which has 2 spooky creature types. This 6-mana 3/3 flyer brings 2 1/1 bats along for the ride, it can create bat creature tokens, and it can sacrifice bats to regenerate. While the rate on the card might not seem amazing at first, it was actually a fairly dominant card in Ravnica Block Constructed. It was capable of making so many bodies and generating so much value that it could quickly overwhelm decks in a format with a fairly limited card pool. It was played in 6 of the top 8 decks from that Block Constructed Pro Tour in a pretty wide variety of decks, ranging from Orzhov Aggro to Abzan Midrange to Sultai Control. Basically, it was a fixture in the format. Apart from all that success in Ravnica Block Constructed though, the Skeleton Vampire hasn't seen play anywhere else. At number 2, it is Gutterbones, which is the newest card on the list, making it all the more impressive that it's already so high up on it. Gutterbones starts with a nice aggressive stat line as a 1-mana 2/1, and when it comes into play, it does so tapped, but the rest of what the card has going on is some serious upside. You can return it from your graveyard to your hand for 1 generic and a black, provided your opponent has lost life during your turn. That's a pretty easy requirement to meet if you're playing an aggro deck, and that has led to Gutterbones being really successful in aggressive black decks in both Standard and Pioneer. However, it last put up a top 8 at a major event back in 2020. And at number 1, it is Golgari Grave Troll. This skeleton troll sports one of Magic's most powerful mechanics, Dredge, and that has led to it claiming the title as the best skeleton in the history of Magic. Dredge allows you to replace a draw by milling cards from the top of your library, and the troll sports Dread 6, which is the highest dredge value of any card in the game. And this allows you to quickly load your graveyard for no mana at all, which is massively powerful in decks that are built to use the graveyard as a resource. If you ever cast it, it can also fuel itself since it gets a +1/+1 counter for each creature card in your graveyard. That said, people don't really play the Troll to cast it. They play it to load up the graveyard. The Troll has fueled dredge decks in Extended, Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, and it's banned in Modern because it made graveyard decks in that format too good, so while it won't be gaining any more points there, it's going to continue to do work in both Legacy and Vintage, and I don't really see any other skeleton ever surpassing Golgari Grave Troll for the #1 spot on this list. So, those are Magic's top 10 skeletons. If you want to build a spooky skeleton deck, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you want to catch up on past MTG top 10s, including many more that are Halloween inspired, you should see the playlists on your screen shortly, and if you want to catch future MTG top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.